Okay, the first story that I want to try in this format is a story I came up with called "The Three Beautiful Pigs." I might change the title because, again, I slapped that title together just because I was like trying to get everything done in one night. But here's the story. Once upon a time, there was a guy named John, and John was a regular guy. He, like a lot of people, decided to go to a fortune teller just because, he's just curious and had to know. But this fortune teller gave him a bad read. This fortune teller told him that he was going to die. And he was not just going to die, he was going to die of starvation and be surrounded by other people that starved. But when he asked the fortune teller for more details, the fortune teller couldn't give him any more details. The fortune teller didn't know. So he didn't know if it was going to be a plague. He didn't know if it was going to be a siege. He didn't know if he was just going to be stuck on a boat where they didn't have food and then they all died of starvation. So he didn't know anything else except for the fact that he was going to die of starvation, surrounded by other people that were starving. He also asked her, "How can I avoid this?" And she says the only way to avoid it is to have enough food to get through 5 years. That means he's got to have enough food to get through 5 years. Now, this is a problem because this guy doesn't got a lot of money and he's broke. He can barely afford food for a week. He certainly can't afford food for 5 years. So he's got a serious problem. So he took this to heart. And so there was a wizard in a nearby town, and he went and visited him. And he said, you got to help me. This is, apparently I'm going to die. I went to this fortune teller. Everybody says she's legit. She says that I'm going to die of starvation. And I'm broke. So when he goes to the wizard, he says, I got a problem. I don't have enough money to buy food for a whole week, let alone 5 years. I don't know when this is going to happen. I don't know how this is going to happen. All I know is it's going to happen. So the wizard says, I think I can come up with something to help you, but you got to do something for me first. There was a rival wizard in a town yonder. And he's like, you got to take this guy out because he's more powerful than me and I don't want to get cursed. He'll probably see me coming. So if you take care of him, I will take care of you. Well, this guy, he's not really an assassin, but he's like, he doesn't have a choice. He knows he's going to die a horrible death of starvation if he don't get this done. So he goes and does it. And he's successful. So he comes back. He's like, I did it. I did what you wanted. This dude's gone. Help me out. So the wizard does help him out. The wizard comes up with an ingenious idea because neither of them knew what the situation was. So whatever the solution was, it had to be able to help the guy in whatever situation he wound up in. So the wizard came up with an ingenious idea to enchant a spoon. And what he did was he enchanted a spoon that will amplify the nourishment of food. In other words, one bite of food is worth a whole meal. One bite. So this particular enchanted spoon can amplify the effect of the smallest amount of food. He also gave him an enchanted bow. Now, this particular bow was for when things got really bad. And what I mean by really bad is one of the things we knew about this was he's going to be surrounded by other people that were starving. He enchanted the bow because there's not a lot of people that can stomach the idea of cannibalism. Like, if you have to wind up eating a person because you're starving, even if you get through, it's not going to be good. You know what I mean? You're not going to be very psychologically adjusted. So, all right. So he gives him a enchanted spoon and an enchanted bow. And what this enchanted bow does is any arrow shot from this bow into a person will transform that person into the last animal that person ate. So if the last animal that person ate was a steak, this person will get turned into a cow. If the last animal that this person ate was a pig, the person gets transformed into a pig, etc., etc. So, with these two items, they were both fairly confident that he could survive this upcoming calamity. And he did. He survived. Turned out it was a siege. By he just wound up in the wrong city when an enemy city surrounded it with an army, and they sat around that city for 5 years. They sat and they put that city to a 5-year siege. Well, he survived. And not only did he survive, it was because he was one of the only survivors. He got rich in the process. The city survived. The king was happy. He gifted a lot of people, the few people that survived and held out. He gifted them a lot of money and land. So this guy, not only did he survive, but he wound up better for it. And that's basically the end of his story. Now, he passed these two enchanted items down to his son, and then his son passed this enchanted item down to his daughter. So that is John's granddaughter. And this is where our story picks up. Now, on to the granddaughter. Now, the granddaughter's name is Gina, all right? And again, this family has money, doing real well. And Gina is in her early 20s. And in this particular time period, early 20s and not being married is not good. All right? So Gina is chomping at the bit to find a decent suitor. Because she's got money and she doesn't want to marry somebody lower than her. All right? There is a love interest in town. It's another family with money. And this particular guy is named Marcus Havel. Now, Marcus Havel's, he's a handsome guy. And he is at that age where there's serious talk about him finding somebody to get married to. So, Marcus starts, asking around. And this gets Gina all excited. But there's a problem. It doesn't take long for Gina to find out that Marcus doesn't like her that much. He is more fond of another girl in town. Again, and her family has a bit of money. It's not as much, but she has, they have a bit of money. And her name is Jody. All right. The worst part about this is he finds out that Marcus doesn't like her because she's a little bit on the big side. A little bit on the big side. Now, this is the day and age where guys normally like girls on the big side, but she's a little bigger than guys want. All right. So, and it also comes out that he is more interested in Jody. Gina, this makes her insane because number one, she considers her and her family to be far above Jody's family. And no girl wants to be told that the guy that they're interested in is more attracted to another girl. That's not something girls appreciate. So she becomes like obsessed. I mean, she can't stand the idea. She can't stand the idea of Jody getting the guy that she wants. Knowing that one of the big reasons why Marcus prefers Jody, Gina comes up with an ingenious plan to use the enchanted magical spoon that was passed down to her by her granddad on Jody. She's going to use it on Jody. Okay? Now, the family has been using that spoon on the farm animals because it has an amazing effect of amplifying the food that the farm animals eat. They can fatten up a cow or a pig in a few days with the smallest amount of food with this enchanted spoon. And so that's what they've been doing with this enchanted spoon for the longest. So she knew how effective this spoon was at making things bigger. So she's like, by the time I'm done with her, she's going to be 3 times the size of me. And then we'll see what Marcus has to say about her. So, with this ingenious plan hatched in her head, she invites Jody over. She invites Jody over to her house. She sends out invitations. But Jody always has some excuse or some reason why she can't go. So she can't get Jody to come over, or she's having trouble getting her to come over. So she goes over to Jody's house. She asks, hey, well, we're passing through, and we'd like to stop by your house, and we'll have dinner or something. And of course, Jody can't turn her down, so she agrees. So they all have dinner. But as they're having dinner, Gina swaps Jody's spoon with the enchanted spoon. And the exact thing that you would think happened. But there was a hiccup in the plan. The servants at Jody's bust all of the silverware together and took off with it. And Gina couldn't risk calling attention to the spoon. So, reluctantly, Gina had to leave that night and leave the spoon there. But she didn't care that much because, as far as she was concerned, what she was after had gotten done, and she'd get the spoon back pretty soon. She would find a way to get the spoon back. She wasn't worried about it. Her plan worked too well. Jody blew up like a balloon. She was a large girl now. And of course, she didn't know why. And sort of a side plus occurred because no one in the family knew that the spoon was the issue. Other people in the family would use it too, and they would blow up. So the family had no idea what was going on. This family was perplexed, and they were they felt like they might be under some sort of odd curse. They had no idea what was going on. And to Gina, this was hilarious. She was going to leave the spoon there for a few more weeks because this is funny. But Gina had a slave boy named Darren, and this slave boy was not too fond of Gina. So one day, this slave boy sneaks over to Jody's and tells the family what had happened. Tells them that there's an enchanted spoon in this house that you have, that whoever eats from the spoon, it amplifies their food, and you're likely to blow up like a whale. And of course, this family, fearing that they're under some sort of odd curse, had been fasting now for the last week. All of them trying to get back to a normal size, not knowing what's going on, starving themselves. So finding out what the issue was a relief to them. Okay, so Jody's plan worked very well. Marcus Havel, the guy that was interested in Jody and Gina wanted, that guy had found out what happened to Jody, and he was no longer interested. So he was out of the picture. Jody's plan had worked perfectly. He bounced. He was on to another. He ended up marrying some noble woman from a different city. After Jody found out what happened to her, you would expect her to like be mad as hell. You would expect her to want revenge. But Jody didn't. Jody was like a really good girl, and she was super into helping people around the town. So she took the spoon and she would sort of do tours around town. She'd visit people that were poor, that needed food, and she would bake this particular kind of cake. And she would feed them this cake with that spoon. And of course, a couple bites and they were full, and she would use the spoon. A couple bites and they were full. They loved her for it. And her reputation began elevating in the town. They were starting to look at her like a saint. You know what I mean? They were like, and no one knew what was going on. So they just assumed that it was her cooking. They were like, she had some sort of blessed cooking that would magically fatten people up from a visit. And they would make jokes about, I'm satisfied as a visit from Jody. They would make these jokes, and her reputation started to grow. And Gina, being she was, she couldn't take this. Like, even though her plan had worked, she had gotten rid of, she had stopped Marcus from wanting to marry Jody. She couldn't leave well enough alone. She hated the fact that people were starting to look at Jody as some sort of saint, and she knew what was going on. She knew that Jody had somehow found out what the spoon did and was using it to make herself famous. So, without thinking about it, she called a town meeting. She calls a town meeting, and at the same time she calls the town meeting, she commissions her slave boy, Darren, to go retrieve the spoon. She knows that Jody is going to be at this town meeting. It's a very good possibility that Jody won't have the spoon on her. So, and if she did have the spoon on her, that she was going to take it from her herself. So she sends her slave boy, Darren, to Jody's house to retrieve the spoon. It's kind of a backup, you know. She calls this big town meeting. She's gonna blow Jody up in the middle of everything. So she calls town meeting. Everybody gets together to say, what's this all about? And then she proceeds to tell them all exactly how Jody was gaining all this notoriety, and it wasn't her cake, it wasn't her cooking, it wasn't because she was such a good person. It was this enchanted spoon that she had given Jody, and that's what's been going on, and that Jody has been deceiving everyone. But the plan blew up in her face, because the way the town saw it was, this was a trick from Gina, and they didn't even care how Jody was going about. They didn't care how Jody was going about doing all these good deeds. In fact, they were mad at Gina that she had this enchanted spoon all this time, and she hadn't been helping everyone out like Jody. So the whole thing, she didn't think it through, and it blew up in her face. So knowing and feeling, because everybody started like getting loud, all headed home. They knew things were going south with this whole meeting, so they all headed back home. Okay. At the same time, the slave boy Darren had found the spoon. He had found the spoon. But he had no intention of giving this spoon back to Gina. He also knew about the bow. He knew that Gina and her husband and her brother would be home soon. And he waited for him with the bow we're talking about. They're coming in. Lights them up. Immediately, because again, Gina is a pig farmer. Immediately, all three of them turn into pigs because that was the last thing they ate. They all turn into pigs. So what does Darren do with that spoon? Well, he gives them a nice big meal. A few nice big meals. He knew what was going to happen. The townspeople, they had thought about it for a while, and after a day or two, they decided that they're going to go get that spoon. They're like, this is messed up. They were still mad at Gina. They figured that spoon belonged to the town. So they all gather up pitchforks and torches, and they head on down to Gina's house. But when they get there, they didn't find Gina. All they find is a slave boy. And they say to the slave boy, where they at? And the slave boy's like, oh, they left. They were afraid. Like, you guys didn't seem very happy with them. They took off to a different town. But they know you guys are mad, and they want to give you a peace offering. So they told you that you guys can pick, the whole town can pick a few of the best pigs they can find, and you can have those as a peace offering. And you can get them when they come back. And then, of course, they asked Darren about the spoon. He's like, oh, I don't, like, they took that spoon with them. They're not going to leave that here. Of course, it's believable. So they go outside. They're like, all right. Of course, there's these 3 absolutely enormous, fat, beautiful pigs. So, of course, they pick those 3 fat, beautiful pigs, slaughter them. Whole town gets to eat. Whole town's happy. Whole town forgets about Gina and how she was selfish. And they just say to themselves, well, we'll deal with them when they come back. Till then, Darren said that I'm in charge of the estate, and they put me in charge until they get back. So, as far as they knew, right now, Darren was the one in charge of the house and all businesses. And they would just, they'll deal with them when they get home. Everybody goes home full and satisfied. And that's the end of the story. Okay, guys. What did you think about that story? Do you think did it have a good twist? Do you think I should have done something, do you think maybe it'd be cool if I did something different? Were you surprised by the end, the twist at the end, sort of? You know what I mean? Maybe some of you smart people could have saw it coming. Anyway, please like and subscribe. Please at least hit the like button. Please at least hit the like button. Please. YouTube hates me. Help YouTube like me a little bit more and hit the like button. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about, if you think it'd be fun to listen to me make stories up around magical items. And I'm going to try to build this world, share it with anyone who will listen. Anyway, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Appreciate your input. And I'll see you next time.